know the one thing I hate doing the most? Well, actually, the worst thing is cleaning out the cat's litter box. But the number 2 thing on my long list of most hated things to do is arguing with people about the supposed photographic evidence that proves the moon landings were faked. For the most part, these claims have been around for more than 30 years, and they've been successfully debunked for that much time as well. Yet, they're the first memory verses new believers learn from the Moon Hoax Bible, and they're usually the first volley veteran hoax peddlers toss out when they smell fresh blood, as deceptive as upon sacrifice. Wading through these pedestrian claims is almost a rite of passage. It's something that every would-be moon hoax debunker has to endure to earn their apprentice certificates. Even though these claims are a general insult to your average 6th grader's intelligence, they never seem to go away. That's the worst part of this second worst thing I hate to do, because arguing with people who believe, or say they believe these claims, is like arguing with an elderly person who has dementia. Those of you who happen to be caregivers to someone with dementia know what I'm talking about here, right? At first, before you know what's going on, you try to correct them. No, Mom, that's not the way it was. Then, as their true memories fade farther into oblivion and the random stories take over to fill in the gaps, you finally realize that the reality has changed. Hoax believers live in a different reality, too. Arguing with them is pointless. No matter how right you are, you can't win. No matter how logical or persuasive your position is, no matter how many flaws you point out in your opponent's argument, no matter how many times you point out the same flaws, you just can't make them change their minds. You might as well argue with a brick. Perhaps my main problem in dealing with these bricks, no, let's call them hoax mongers. My problem is that I'm obviously not as perceptive as they are. I thought I'd get that out there for the benefit of any hoaxmongers who happen to stumble through the neighborhood. What I mean by not being as perceptive is that I just can't see invisible cats. No, really, I'm not kidding. I've never been able to do that. No matter what I do, no matter how hard I've tried over the years, they're just always, well, invisible to me. In his book, The Four Loves, C.S. Lewis tells us a belief in invisible cats cannot perhaps be logically disproved, but it tells us a good deal about those who hold it. That statement is certainly true among hoaxmongers. Now, this video is about invisible cats. About 2.5 years ago, YouTube user Hunchbacked posted a video with what I thought was a novel photographic anomaly claim. In the Cross-eyed Camera Bis, Hunchbacked claims that while Apollo 16 astronaut John Young was busy snapping his 5th panorama set at Station 1, the TV camera that was simultaneously sending a live feed of the 2 astronauts back to Earth was actually pointing in the wrong direction. According to Hunchbacked, the orientation of the camera is obvious to the most casual observer. It looks like an invisible cat to me. A month or so later, I posted a video response to Hunchbacked's video. God, say that 5 times as fast as you can. In my video, I compared John's suspect photo from Station 1 to an equally poor resolution black and white photo taken by Charlie Duke at Station 9. I used a crude line sketch to help my blind skeptics recognize the similarities between the 2 photos. The most striking similar features are the location of the lens hood and the lens being centered over the camera handle. In my opinion, the TV camera orientation is the same in both photos. Complicating the comparison is motion blur in John's photo. Compared to one of Charlie's black and white photos taken at Station 1, John's photo has noticeable horizontal motion blur, which is even worse in his preceding photo. One of the major criticisms of my video, especially from hoaxmongers, has been that I should have used a 3D model to illustrate my point. One supposedly neutral critic, Ricky Lionheart, even went so far as to post a video in which he presents what he thinks is a perfect 3D model of the gotcha, the ground-commanded television assembly, and he puts his model on top of John Young's blurry photo to supposedly prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that the TV camera is not pointing at the astronauts. Sorry, but this looks like another invisible cat to me. Now, I'm not a 3D expert, but I did play Christopher Wren in a Civic Theater production of Mousetrap 35 years ago. So with my Thisbian architectural experience and my feeble powers of perception to guide me, I somehow found a couple of discrepancies between the 2 different views of Ricky's model. First, When he dropped his model into the photo, it looks like he significantly chopped back the lens hood until it's hardly existent. Perhaps it's a coincidence, but by cutting back the lens hood, the darkened shadow under the hood in his model resembles the dark area near the top left corner of the camera in the picture. Of course, if you're as non-perceptive as I am, and you compare the suspect photo to the previous photo in the pan set, you'll see that from a slightly different angle, the dark area that could easily be confused with Ricky's shorter version of the lens hood is actually a dark feature on the lunar surface, partially blocked by the camera. Secondly, Ricky completely chopped off the cord and 3-inch long connector coming out of the back of the CTV. Again, perhaps coincidentally, this makes it more of a challenge for those of us who are not 3D experts to compare the model to the photo. Not only would the 3-inch plug add noticeable length to the rotated model, but because he placed his model so close to the photo image, it blocks the part of the photo where the cord would be. Not being a 3D expert, I have no perception of why he would make these modifications, but if he did it intentionally, I'm sure Ricky was just trying to help us see the truth. Something else I'm curious about is that Ricky supposedly let 50 people preview both a head-on view and a rotated view of his model. The consensus, of course, was that the rotated view matched the photo perfectly. So, were all those 50 people 3D experts? They must have been. Why would Ricky let 50 ordinary people voice an opinion when only someone with Ricky's expertise is qualified to decide which view is a closer match to the actual photo? And if they weren't all experts, then why didn't Ricky show us both views in his video? Perhaps Ricky was trying to protect those of us who are not as perceptive, who are not 3D experts, from seeing a view that Ricky, in all his wisdom, decided would only confuse us. On the other hand, if Ricky was so proud of this model, I'm surprised he didn't show it off. I would, if it were my model. Actually, I'd probably start off with some wireframes, just because I think wireframes look cool. Then, maybe I'd show how my model literally jumps off the page from the orthogonal views I used to construct it. Then I'd pose my model, like a Barbie doll, to show how well I could duplicate various views of the gotcha from the Apollo photographs. I'd also trim the cable connector back a bit, so I wouldn't have to listen to the hoax mongers complain about how long it is. Then I'd spin my model. Why? Because it's a 3D model, for crying out loud. Those of us who aren't perceptive 3D experts expect to see 3D models spinning, so you can see them from every angle. Now, what I wouldn't do with my model is expect people to pay for a copy. If I thought it was an accurate model, I wouldn't fear if anybody dared challenge it. I'd make it publicly available someplace, like on the SketchUp 3D warehouse. And if I constructed my model with a recent download of SketchUp 2015, which includes a 30-day free trial of SketchUp Pro, I would make it a dynamic model, so you can adjust its elevation and azimuth. Of course, I'm not a 3D expert, so how could I ever figure out how to do all that? If we had such a model, we might use it to double-check Ricky's expert analysis. I'd start by looking at the original claim. According to Hunchbacked, the gotcha that was supposed to be pointing at the astronauts was actually pointing 24 degrees off to stage left. If that were the case, the gotcha would look like this. Now, as you're aware, I'm not a 3D expert, but for some reason, this doesn't look quite right. Perhaps the camera was turned only 12 degrees. No, something is still wrong. Let's try 6 degrees. That's still not quite right, is it? But how about a head-on view? Oddly, in my non-expert opinion, a head-on view looks closer than any of the rotated views. Of course, again, I'm not a 3D expert, so what do I know? Did I mention that Ricky is a 3D expert? That's what he tells us. He's also a radiation expert, and because his family worked at Disney theme park in Florida in the 70s, he has insight into how Disney faked the moon landings. Did I mention that Ricky calls himself neutral on the moon hoax issue? Oh, yes, he is. He also thinks the U.S. government faked the 9/11 attacks, and NASA is the fourth branch of the U.S. government. No, really. In spite of his aggressive, neutral stance, Ricky says he's not a hoaxmonger at all, being equally critical of both sides of the hoax issues. He also distrusts government. Surprise, surprise. And he thinks we should challenge those in authority, but that nobody except a fellow expert, one of his equals, should dare challenge him. As far as I'm concerned, Ricky is in the same class of hoaxmongers as our old friend Adrian over at the AW 130 archives. He's the kind of hoaxmonger that asks questions, rejects reasonable answers, believes the simplest explanation to whatever he refuses to understand is that it was faked, and then dismisses criticism because he calls himself neutral. Sorry, Ricky, but you are about as middle of the road as the Tea Party. Ciao, moon hoax conspirators, wherever you are.